directing and DPing a 10k social shoot revolving around food for meal kit brand Gousto. Even though there's thousands upon thousands of directors, DPs and like out there in London alone, never mind around the world, the commercial side of the industry is comparatively small. And when this job came up, I was a little surprised as to what direction it was coming from, as I have worked with Gousto before in some capacity, editing in excess of 10 of their previous meal guides via my friends at Detail Films in South London. But this job, directing and DPing 2 9x16 social films for their Christmas-themed meal launch, came from somewhere else. Another production based here in London with an even more food-centric roster of directors and photographers. The top producer there being the ever-friendly Jason Underhill, who I'd only met a couple of weeks before this shoot came up whilst on a shoot for another food-related brand, Just Eat, in Spain. That shoot I was on because I'd worked with the in-house creatives at Just Eat previously, and before they went off on various maternity leaves, they very kindly made a note in their handovers that they wanted me to shoot the motion side of the next career campaign. And in case motion sounds confusing to anyone out there, a lot of these sorts of campaigns are tagged alongside the photography, so they call it stills and motion. Maybe that's pretty obvious, but just in case it's not. And that shoot was being produced by a brought in on a freelance basis, Jason, who, despite having only met me for a few days on a shoot that did not at all go to plan and was not one for any of our showreels, he took a liking to me enough to put me forward for this Gousto job. The job was being handled by the in-house team at Gousto, a team that always seemed to be incredibly busy producing multiple shoots with multiple freelancers and production houses. I was sent this spreadsheet with a signed off budget breakdown, which, although included a generous day rate for myself to direct and DP each of the 2 days, it did not allow for camera rental, monitors, basic first AC stuff like a wireless follow focus, and any lighting. So we had to say goodbye to the dolly and rejig slightly to accommodate the necessities. Fortunately for Gousto, leading up to this job, following on from my most successful financial year to date, I just bought a red v-raptor. So in a way, I would kind of lose out financially, but I was getting a pretty decent day rate comparative to the budget. So I was happy to bring on my camera and any kit we might need from my van as part of my fee, as I saw it as another prove myself moment, both with Gousto and for my food reel. All 4 of the crew, myself included, were supplying some level of kit, and none of us got full whack for it, but everyone was accommodating to get it to work within the budget. Of which, by the way, having been shared the initial budget, I did ask for more money for X, Y, and Z, but was just told, no, that's the most we can possibly spend. Always better to ask than not. Also on the shoot, I believe it was the first time I've ever actually worked with a proper grip on set as a DP. There have been grip roles on plenty of my jobs, but usually filled out by someone not fully qualified who's doubling up from another role on the crew on account of the lack of budget. So, as is often the case when availability isn't there, or in this instance, just because I didn't know anyone yet, I asked one of my good cinematographer friends for a recommendation, and Nick came back recommended as the most reliable and least grumpy grip he knew. So that was good enough for me. I spent 30 minutes or so on the phone to Nick on 2 occasions discussing what we wanted to try and do, trying to get hold of a proper dolly within our reduced budget, ultimately failing and then making use of what grip he could supply within the budget to achieve the moves we wanted. The end result does not look complicated, but it still took a little doing so to get there. And I was initially trying to probably be more ambitious with some of the camera moves, things that Gousto didn't necessarily want or need. And without the proper tools to achieve them, we'd scrapped most of this anyway before we actually came to the first shoot day. I also chatted to my semi-regular first AC James Wicks, as well as Charlie the Gaffer, about what we'd like to try and do, as well as discussing shooting higher frame rates so we knew we were going to have enough light to do so. These conversations should have all come from me regardless as the cinematographer on this job, but I was also playing a bit of a role of producer for moments here and there, as that role wasn't entirely traditionally filled out as it normally might be by the in-house team at Gousto. Outside of crew phone calls and plenty of emails back and forth with the in-house team and rental houses, there were 2 meetings beforehand, an initial chat with the creatives and in-house team sharing visual references, loose script ideas and a storyboard, and then a PPM 48 hours before the first shoot day. The shoot took place in a food studio in northwest London, which was provided for us outside of the crew and kit budget I'd been shared, as well as their food stylists, hand models, props, prop food, breakfast, lunch, and the in-house production team themselves. Annoyingly, we were shooting on the 2nd floor of a building with no elevator, but fortunately we did know this in advance, and it was what it was. I had a good deal on the studio, and we'd already taken this into consideration when looking at the feasibility of getting a dolly that weighs over 130 kilograms up the stairs, round a corner, and through any door frames. We'd looked at power options and taken into consideration any blacking out that might need doing, as although once we were going to be set up, things should be pretty simple. Charlie, the Gaffer, for example, didn't have any sparks to give him a helping hand, so we were all going to need plenty of time to load in and play our roles, with myself going between the other 3 departments, lending hands where I could. In prep, I put together a shoot schedule and stuck it on the wall of the studio alongside the boards I've been given from the creatives at Gousto to try and keep things crystal clear for everyone, myself included, to make sure that we didn't miss anything. At first, I was quite excited to be shooting in 9:16, rather than the traditional 16:9 and also can you frame for 5:4 and 1:1 and 9:16, all in the same frame, as is so often the case. But it turns out that I just really don't like the ratio 9:16. It's much harder to make things look sexy in this ratio, at least for me. But all the same, we had the camera mounted on an L bracket so we weren't wasting any valuable pixels on screen. I couldn't afford to rent monitors, so tried to make some weird AirPlay rig work from my iPad via the Red Control app to my laptop to a monitor mounted at 90 degrees. But the lag was just too much from the Red app for this sort of thing though. I do not recommend it. But then budget. We didn't have a ton of time for shots. You might think that for 2 15 to 20 second videos shot over 2 days that we'd be laughing. This is easy. There's more than enough time. But setting and packing downtime had to be included. And outside of getting the lighting and any camera moves and focus pulls right, we needed the food to look good, to be ready not too early so it spoils, and not too late so we're waiting around, for the hand models to get the action right, for the rocket leaves to spread in just the right way when flying through the air, for the steam to not entirely fog up the lens. There were a lot of variables.
You've never had pigs in blankets like this before.
On day 2, the call time was a generous 8:30 a.m. But due to the horrific traffic conditions here in London, it made more sense for me to leave early enough to arrive there at 7 a.m, rather than risk sitting in traffic for a predicted 1 hour 30 to 3 hours journey time. So I parked up at a cafe nearby, treating myself to a warm breakfast and making selects from the previous day in an effort to go above and beyond and make the editor's life a little bit easier. Maybe I wouldn't have been as eager to do something like this if I hadn't had the time to kill, but I did, so I did. I felt a bit weird about the post-production on this one. It was being handled by a fantastic freelance editor and motion graphics artist that the brand works with regularly. And they had asked for my input, but then it also kind of felt a little bit like they didn't actually want it. So I was torn between wanting to be helpful and hopefully make it a showreel piece, and also not step on anyone's toes or be too pushy. After all, the brand knows themselves better than anyone else does, and I'd quite like to be hired by them again. I tried to be helpful to Dan the editor, giving some music suggestions to work to, as well as guide VOs for him to work his pacing around in the style that we discussed throughout the creative. However, without an acknowledgement, but still being CC'd in on all the back and forth over emails on the edit. My music choices were ultimately dismissed for something less in line with the creative by those in-house, but just more in line with previous videos that the brand had done before. Seemingly my VO thoughts were also dismissed, as I wasn't involved in the recording with the artist, and the marks I hit in my example, again I thought entirely in line with the creative they'd given, had not been interpreted by the voiceover artist. So I think they were probably after less direction and more of a cinematographer who will organise everything. Shame. Another real piece missed. But another experience to share with all of you, as well as a chance to work with Nick the Grip for the first time, who's been involved with a couple more budget-heavy shoots with me since. I got to shoot on my new sexy camera, I made some money, and some memories that will last a lifetime, or at least until the next Christmas cycle. I hope that was somehow useful to you. Check out this playlist I put together for more shenanigans from behind the camera, and make sure to subscribe for more semi-helpful tips and interesting insider industry knowledge.